The Wyoming sun hung low like a copper penny melting into the horizon, painting the dusty trail between Fort Bridger and the Utah border in shades of rust and blood. Thomas Briggs had ridden this path more times than he cared to count, his weathered hands steady on the reins of his chestnut mare. Belle. At 37, he'd seen enough of life to know when trouble was brewing, and the air today carried that particular weight heavy and electric, like the moments before a desert storm. He'd left the last settlement 3 days back, preferring the company of sagebrush and jackrabbits to the noise of saloons and the questions of curious townsfolk. The war had been over for near 20 years now, but some men still carried it in their eyes, and Thomas was tired of being recognized as one of them. Belle's ears pricked forward suddenly, and Thomas's hand moved instinctively to the Winchester in his saddle scabbard. Years of riding alone had taught him to trust his horse's senses more than his own. Through the shimmering heat waves, he spotted what had caught Belle's attention, a figure, small and crumpled, beside a split boulder that locals called Widow's Rock. As he drew closer, the figure resolved into a young woman, though woman seemed too generous a word for the broken thing huddled against the stone. Her dress, once blue calico from what he could tell, hung in tatters. Dark hair fell in matted strands across her face, and her arms wrapped around a small canvas bag as if it contained the last precious thing in all creation. Thomas dismounted slowly, his spurs chiming soft in the desert quiet. He'd learned long ago that sudden movements around frightened creatures, human or otherwise, rarely ended well. "Ma'am." His voice came out rougher than intended, scraped raw by trail dust and disuse. "Ma'am, you hurt." The woman's head snapped up, and Thomas found himself looking into eyes wild as a cornered mustang's. They were green, he noted absently, the color of spring grass, but clouded with something that made his chest tighten. He'd seen that look before, in soldiers after bad battles, in women after Indian raids, in children after things children shouldn't survive. "Stay back." Her voice cracked like old leather, but there was steel underneath. Her fingers clutched that bag tighter, knuckles white as sun-bleached bone. I'll scream." Thomas stopped where he was, maybe 10 feet away, and slowly raised his hands, palms out. "No need for that. Name's Thomas Briggs. I'm just passing through." He glanced around the empty landscape. "You alone out here?" A bitter laugh escaped her, more sob than humor. "Aren't we all?" He couldn't argue with that, settling onto his haunches, trying to make himself smaller, less threatening. Thomas studied her without seeming to. No visible wounds he could see, but the way she held herself curled inward. Protective spoke of hurts that didn't always leave marks. Her feet were bare, bleeding from the rocks and thorns. How far had she walked? "Camp folks back in Fort Bridger," he said conversationally, as if finding half-dead women in the middle of nowhere was common as finding sage. "They mentioned something about a runaway. Said she took off from her stepfather's place. Stole a horse." The woman's jaw tightened. "Camp folks say a lot of things." "That they do." Thomas pulled his canteen from his belt, slow and careful, and set it on the ground between them. "Water's fresh from Beaver Creek. You look like you could use it." She stared at the canteen like it might be a rattler in disguise. Minutes passed, marked only by the whistle of wind through the canyon and Belle's occasional snort. Finally, thirst won over caution. The woman crawled forward, snatched the canteen, and scrambled back to her rock. She drank in desperate gulps, water running down her chin, wetting the torn collar of her dress. "Easy," Thomas murmured. "Too much too fast'll make you sick." She lowered the canteen, wiping her mouth with a trembling hand. "Why do you care?" It was a fair question. Thomas considered it, watching a hawk circle lazy overhead. Maybe I just don't fancy explaining to the marshal why I left a woman to die when I could have helped." "I'm not dying." "No." He gestured at her bleeding feet, her sunburned face, The way her hands shook even holding the canteen. Could have fooled me. "I'm not going back!" The words came fierce and sudden. "Whatever they told you, whatever they're paying, I'm not going back to him." "Didn't say you should." Thomas stood slowly, joints protesting after too many years in the saddle. "But you can't stay here neither. Son'll cook you by noon tomorrow, if the coyotes don't find you first." He walked back to Belle, pulled his bedroll and an old blanket from behind the saddle. The woman tensed as he approached again, but he simply set the items a few feet from her and backed away. "There's a grove of cottonwoods about 2 miles east," he said. "Good water, some shade. I'm headed that way to camp for the night. You're welcome to follow. Or not. Your choice." He mounted Belle without waiting for an answer, touched his hat brim in farewell, and started east at an easy walk. He didn't look back, though every instinct screamed at him to check if she was following. Sometimes the best way to help a spooked creature was to give it room to make its own decisions. The sun had dropped another hand's width toward the horizon when he heard the soft scuff of bare feet on rocky ground. He didn't turn, didn't acknowledge it, just kept Belle at that same steady pace. When he reached the cottonwoods, he went about making camp as if alone, hobbling Belle to graze, gathering kindling, starting a small fire in a ring of stones from some previous traveler's camp. She appeared at the edge of the firelight as full dark settled in, still clutching that bag, the blanket he'd left wrapped around her shoulders like armor. She didn't come close, just hovered at the edge where light met darkness. Thomas set about heating beans and salt pork in his one dented pot, brewing coffee in the battered percolator that had seen him through more campaigns than he cared to remember. He filled a tin plate, set it on a flat rock halfway between his position and hers, then returned to his own supper without a word. She waited until he was absorbed in his own meal before creeping forward to claim the food. She ate like she hadn't seen a meal in days, maybe longer, but her eyes never left him, watchful as a deer at a waterhole. "Got a name?" he asked eventually, keeping his voice casual, eyes on the fire. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the pop of burning wood and the distant cry of a screech owl. Finally, does it matter? Suppose not. Thomas poured himself coffee. The familiar bitter scent, a comfort in the darkness. "Just figured if we're sharing a camp, might be nice to call you something besides, 'Hey you.'" More silence. Then, so quiet, he almost missed it. "They call me lots of things. Thief, runaway, property." The last word hit him like a fist to the gut. He'd heard that tone before, that particular flavor of bitter resignation. His jaw tightened, but he kept his voice level. "What do you call yourself?" She looked up at him then, those green eyes catching the firelight like a cat's. "I used to know. Now, I don't call myself anything. I'm nobody." "Well then, Miss Nobody," Thomas said, setting down his coffee cup. "You're welcome to share this fire long as you need. I'll be heading toward the Uinta Valley come morning. There's a trading post there, run by a woman named Martha Clearwater. She's good people, doesn't ask questions, and she's always looking for help with her store." The woman Miss Nobody pulled her knees to her chest, the bag still clutched against her stomach. "Why are you doing this?" Thomas considered the question, staring into the fire. Why was he doing this? He'd asked himself the same thing when he'd stopped instead of riding on, when he'd left the water, when he'd slowed Belle to let her follow. "Maybe because I've been nobody before too," he said finally. "Maybe because the world's hard enough without us making it harder for each other." He stood, brushing off his pants. "I'll bed down over by those rocks. Fire's yours for the night." As he spread his bedroll a respectful distance away, he heard her voice, small and broken. I can't be near people. Can't let them touch me. I'll just break apart." Thomas paused in the act of pulling off his boots. "Then don't let him. Nobody's got the right to touch you unless you say so." "But what if I'm broken already?" He turned to look at her, this small, fierce, shattered thing trying so hard to hold herself together. Then you'll heal. Everything does, given time and space to do it. He lay back, pulling his hat over his eyes. Get some rest, Miss Nobody. Tomorrow's a new day. But rest didn't come easy for either of them. Thomas lay awake, hand near his pistol, listening to her restless movements, the occasional whimper that might have been dream or memory. Once, near midnight, he heard her crying, trying to muffle it, but the desert night carried sound like water carries ripples. He didn't move, didn't speak, just lay there being a steady presence in the darkness. Sometimes that was all a body could do, be there, be steady, be proof that the world held more than whatever horrors drove a person to run barefoot into the wilderness. The fire burned low. Stars wheeled overhead, and somewhere in the vast Wyoming night, two broken people shared a silence that said more than words ever could. Morning came slow to the cottonwood grove, filtered through leaves that whispered secrets to the dawn wind. Thomas woke as he always did, sudden and complete, hand checking for his Colt before his eyes even opened. The fire had died to gray ash, and the girl Miss Nobody was gone. Not gone far, though. He found her by the creek, kneeling in the shallows, trying to wash the blood from her feet. She'd rolled up what was left of her dress to her knees, and in the early light, he could see the bruises marking her legs like purple storm clouds. She must have heard him coming. His boots weren't made for sneaking, but she didn't run, just kept washing, her movements mechanical, practiced, like she'd done this before, many times before. Water's cold this early, he offered, stopping a good 20 feet back. Good. Her voice was steadier than last night, though still raw. Cold numbs things. Thomas crouched by the creek upstream from her, splashed water on his face, filled his canteen. Martha Clearwater, the woman I mentioned, she keeps medical supplies. Carbolic salve, bandages, laudanum if the pain's bad. No laudanum. The words came sharp, fierce. No medicines that make you sleep heavy. Never again. He nodded, understanding more than she probably meant to reveal. Fair enough, but you'll need something on those cuts. Else they'll fester. I've had worse. I don't doubt it. He stood, wiping his hands on his pants. I'm making coffee and biscuits. You're welcome to some. Back at camp, he built up the fire and set about making breakfast, giving her space to finish whatever morning ritual helped her face another day. She returned as the coffee started perking, that canvas bag still clutched tight, and settled in her spot from the night before, close enough to feel the fire's warmth, far enough to run. How far to this trading post? She asked, watching him work. Day's ride if we push, day and a half if we go easy. He glanced at her bare, torn feet. Reckon we'll be going easy? I can walk. Never said you couldn't, but Belle's strong enough to carry double, if you've a mind to ride. The look she gave him would have frozen hell itself. I told you, nobody touches me. Riding doesn't require touching. You in front, me behind, plenty of space between. He poured coffee into 2 cups, set one on the ground between them like a peace offering. But walking's fine too. Your choice. She picked up the coffee, wrapped both hands around the tin cup like it was the first warm thing she'd held in forever. Why don't you ask? Ask what? What everyone wants to know. What I did. Why I ran. What kind of woman ends up alone in the desert with nothing but a bag and the clothes on her back? Thomas considered this, sipping his own coffee. Figure if you wanted me to know, you'd tell me. If you don't, it's none of my business. But you're curious. Curious about a lot of things. Doesn't mean I got the right to all the answers. She studied him over the rim of her cup, those green eyes still wary, but maybe, just maybe, a little less wild. You're strange, Mr. Briggs. Been called worse. He pulled hardtack from his saddlebag, set about softening it in his coffee. Question is, Miss Nobody, what do you want to do? I can take you to Martha's, leave you be, or point you toward California if you've got dreams of gold fields. Your life. Your choice. Choice! She laughed, but there was no humor in it. When's the last time someone gave me a choice about anything? Well, you've got one now. What'll it be? She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, the trading post. I can work. I'm good with numbers. Keeping books. My father taught me before. She stopped, jaw clenching. I can work. Martha'll be glad for the help. Gets busy come autumn when the wagon trains stop to resupply before the final push to California. They broke camp after breakfast, Thomas moving slow and careful, explaining everything he was doing so she wouldn't be startled. She watched him like a hawk watches a snake, ready to strike or flee at the first wrong move. When Belle was saddled and ready, Thomas started walking east, leading the mare by her reins. After a few hundred yards, the girl spoke up. This is foolish. We'll take forever at this pace. Got somewhere urgent to be? She fell silent, but he could feel her frustration building like steam in a kettle. Finally, fine, but if you touch me, if you even think about... I won't. He stopped Belle, moved to the far side of the horse. You mount up first. I'll walk alongside until you say different. She approached Belle like the mare might explode, but Thomas's horse was steady as stone, trained to stand for mounting in the middle of battle. The girl grabbed the saddle horn, tried to pull herself up, but her legs were too weak, her feet too damaged. There's a rock over there, Thomas suggested quietly. Might use it as a mounting block. Pride warred with practicality on her face, but practicality won. She led Belle to the rock, managed to swing herself into the saddle with a grunt of pain. Her dress rode up, showing more bruises, some fresh, some fading to yellow-green. Thomas kept his eyes on the horizon. They traveled that way for miles, him walking, her riding, neither speaking. The sun climbed higher, baking the desert floor until heat waves made the distant mountains dance. Thomas handed up the canteen regularly, and she drank without protest, learning the rhythm of desert travel. Around midday, with the sun brutal overhead, she spoke, I know how to ride. My father kept horses before... Again that abrupt stop, like she'd hit a wall inside herself. Want the reins? She looked down at him, surprised. You'd trust me with your horse. Belle's got good sense. She wouldn't let you do anything too foolish. Carefully, like she was handling spun glass, she took the reins from him. Her hands were steady enough, though he noticed she'd wrapped them in strips torn from her petticoat, hiding something. Maybe scars or wounds, or just the need to keep some part of herself covered. They made better time after that. Him walking ahead now, her following on Belle. Sometimes he'd hear her talking to the horse, too low to make out words. But the tone was gentle, almost affectionate. It was the first soft thing he'd heard from her. Late afternoon brought them to a stage station, abandoned these 5 years since the railroad changed the routes. The building's adobe walls still stood, and more importantly, the well still had water. Thomas cranked up a bucket, let Belle drink first, then filled the canteen in his cookpot. We'll rest here a bit, he announced. Too hot to travel until evening. She slid down from Belle carefully, hissing when her feet hit the ground. Without thinking, Thomas stepped forward to steady her, but her violent flinch backward reminded him of his promise. He raised his hands, stepped away. Sorry, habit. She pressed herself against Belle's side, breathing hard. Don't! Just don't! Won't happen again. Inside the station, dust motes danced in shafts of light streaming through holes in the roof. It was cooler, though, and there was a bench where she could rest. Thomas busied himself checking Belle's hooves, giving the girl space to compose herself. I wasn't always like this, she said suddenly. I used to be normal. I think it's hard to remember what normal felt like. Thomas found a curry brush in his saddlebag, started working on Belle's coat. Normal's overrated. Most folks I've met who claimed to be normal were just better at hiding their broken parts. Are you broken? He paused in his brushing. Ma'am, I've been broke, busted, and beaten more ways than I can count. But I'm still here, still moving forward. That's all any of us can do. He said I was his property. The words came out in a rush, like poison being purged. After Father died, my stepfather said I owed him for feeding me, housing me, keeping me decent. Said I had to earn my keep, and when I wouldn't, she stopped, arms wrapping around herself. So I ran. Took his horse because mine was already sold to pay his drinking debts. They'll hang me for horse theft if they catch me. No, they won't. Thomas's voice came out harder than intended. Not while I'm around. She looked at him then. Really looked at him, like she was seeing past the trail dust and weathered exterior to something else. Why do you care what happens to me? He thought about that, running the brush along Belle's flank in long, steady strokes. Why did he care? He'd asked himself that question all day, watching her struggle along, seeing her flinch from shadows, hearing the broken edges in her voice. Maybe because I had a sister once, he said finally. She had green eyes too, and when she needed help, I was too far away to give it. Can't change that, but I can help you. What happened to her? Same thing that happens to too many women out here. She trusted the wrong man, married him quick when our parents died, thought he'd protect her. He didn't. The silence stretched between them, heavy with understanding. Finally, she said, my name's not nobody, I can't say it, not yet, but it's not nobody. That's all right. You tell me when you're ready. As the sun started its descent toward the western mountains, they prepared to move on. This time, when she approached Belle, Thomas saw something different in her posture. Still wary, still protective of herself, but maybe standing a little straighter. Mr. Briggs, would you ride with me just for a while, not touching, just there? I'm tired of being alone. Thomas looked at her, this fierce, broken creature trying so hard to be brave. If that's what you want. He swung up behind the saddle, sitting on Belle's rump. A good foot of space between them. She was rigid as a fence post at first, but as they rode toward the setting sun, he felt her slowly, carefully relax just a fraction. Thank you, she whispered, so quiet he almost missed it. No need for thanks. We're just two people heading in the same direction for a while. But they both knew it was more than that. In the vast loneliness of the Wyoming desert, they'd found something neither had been looking for: a tentative connection, fragile as spun glass but real as the dust beneath Belle's hooves. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was a start. And sometimes, Thomas thought as they rode toward Martha Clearwater's trading post and whatever future waited there, a start was all anyone could ask for. The scream tore through the desert night like a blade through silk, sharp and ragged and full of terror. Thomas was on his feet before his eyes fully opened, hand finding his colt in the darkness, across the dying embers of their fire. The girl thrashed in her blanket, fighting invisible demons with desperate fury. No, please, I'll be good, don't. Her words dissolved into sobs, body curled tight as a fist. Thomas holstered his gun, moved slow and careful toward her. Belle snorted nervously where she stood hobbled nearby, ears flat against her head. Even the horses knew something about this wasn't right. Miss, he kept his voice low, steady, the same tone he'd use with a spooked mare. Miss, you're dreaming. You're safe. Nobody here but you and me. She jerked awake with a gasp, scrambling backward until she hit a boulder, eyes wild and unfocused in the moonlight. For a moment, she didn't seem to know where she was, hands raised defensive in front of her face. Easy, Thomas said, settling back on his heels a good 10 feet away. Just a dream. You're at Willow Springs. Remember we made camp here after leaving the old stage station? Recognition slowly filtered into her eyes. She lowered her hands, though her whole body still shook like leaves in a storm. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to wake you. No harm done. We all got our night terrors. She pulled her knees to her chest, that canvas bag clutched tight as always. In the moonlight, he could see tears tracking down her cheeks, though she made no sound now, just sat there shaking, trying to hold herself together through will alone. Thomas moved back to his bedroll, but instead of lying down, he sat up against his saddle, started cleaning his already clean revolver. The familiar motions were calming, the soft click of metal on metal, a steady rhythm in the darkness. "My sister," he said conversationally, like they were discussing the weather. "She used to get night terrors, something fierce after our parents died. Cholera took them both in the span of a week. Sarah was only 13, had to watch them go. Helped me prepare the bodies when there wasn't nobody else to do it." The girl's breathing was still ragged, but she was listening. Sometimes a story was better than silence for chasing away the dark. "She'd wake up screaming about the smell," he continued, running an oiled cloth along the Colt's barrel. "Said it followed her into her dreams. I'd sit up with her, just like this, cleaning guns or mending tack or whittling. Told her stories about when we were young, before everything went wrong. Eventually, she'd drift back to sleep." "Did it help, the stories?" "Some. Time helped more. Finding reasons to keep going helped most." He reassembled the revolver with practiced ease. "What haunts your dreams? If you don't mind my asking." She was quiet so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, "A room, locked from the outside, no windows, and hands. Hands that wouldn't stop." She shuddered, pulled the blanket tighter. "He said it was my duty. Said God wanted me to be obedient, to honor my father. But he wasn't my father, and God wouldn't want that." Thomas's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice even. "No, God wouldn't want that. I tried to tell the minister, but my stepfather's a deacon, gives money to the church. They said I was hysterical, female troubles." She laughed bitter. "Female troubles? That's what they call it when men trouble females." "How long?" The question came out rougher than he intended. 2 years. Since I turned 16. He was patient at first. Thought he could wear me down with words and guilt. When that didn't work..." She touched her side, a reflexive gesture. "The bruises were always where they wouldn't show. He was careful about that." Thomas set down his gun, picked up a stick, started feeding the fire back to life. The flames cast dancing shadows on the canyon walls, pushed back the darkness a little. "Then, last week," she continued, voice stronger now, like the telling was drawing poison from a wound. "He came to my room different. Had a man with him, fat merchant from Denver. Smelled like tobacco and sweat. Said they'd made a deal. I was part of the merchandise." "Jesus Christ!" The words slipped out before Thomas could stop them. "That's when I ran, climbed out the window, took his horse from the stable, rode until the horse gave out, then walked. Been walking ever since." She looked down at her bandaged feet. "Would have kept walking until I dropped if you hadn't found me." Thomas stood abruptly, walked to the edge of camp where the firelight met darkness, his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides, fighting the urge to mount Bell right now, ride back to whatever town spawned such evil, and put a bullet in 2 men who deserved it. But that wouldn't help the girl, wouldn't undo what was done. "I'm sorry," he said finally, turning back to her. "Sorry you went through that. Sorry there wasn't nobody to help sooner. Sorry the world's got men like that in it." "But you helped. You're helping now." "Not enough. Not near enough." She tilted her head, studying him in the firelight. "You blame yourself for your sister." It wasn't a question. Thomas felt the old guilt twist in his gut, familiar as breathing. "I was off playing soldier, fighting for causes that seem mighty foolish now. She wrote me letters, begged me to come home, but I thought I was saving the world by the time I got back." "What happened to her?" "Her husband beat her to death. Neighbors found her 3 days later." The words came out flat, emptied of emotion by years of repetition in his own mind. "I killed him, shot him down in the street like the dog he was." Should have felt good, but it didn't bring Sarah back." They sat in silence. Two people bound by understanding of how the world could break those it should protect. The fire popped and crackled, sending sparks spiraling up toward stars that watched it all with cold indifference. "Is that why you stopped for me?" she asked eventually. "Because of her." Thomas considered this. "Maybe. Or maybe I stopped because it was the right thing to do. Or maybe I'm just tired of walking past people who need help." He managed a wry smile. "Take your pick." She almost smiled back. He saw it ghost across her features before disappearing. "Well, whatever the reason, I'm glad." Yeah. Even if I am talking to a stranger in the middle of nowhere about things I swore I'd never tell anyone. Sometimes strangers are easier. They don't know who you were before, don't have expectations about who you should be after. She nodded slowly. "I used to be Elizabeth. Before, Elizabeth Sarah Morrow." She looked up at him. "My middle name was after my mother. She died when I was 8. Fever took her." "Elizabeth." He tested the name. "Gentle. It suits you better than nobody." "I don't feel like her anymore. Elizabeth she was clean, whole. She believed in things. God, justice. That people were mostly good." Her voice turned hard. "That girl's dead as my mother." "Maybe. Or maybe she's just hiding, waiting until it's safe to come back out. Like your sister's night terrors, just wait long enough and they'll fade." "No." Thomas was honest. She deserved that much. "They never fully fade, but you learn to live with them. Find things stronger than the fear. Build a life around the broken parts until they're just scars instead of open wounds." Elizabeth pulled the blanket up to her chin, looking younger than her 18 years. "What if I can't? What if I stay broken forever?" "Then you stay broken. Doesn't mean you can't have a life. Doesn't mean you can't find peace, or purpose, or even happiness. Just means you gotta work harder for it than some folks." "Do you have those things, peace, purpose, happiness?" Thomas thought about it. "Peace, sometimes. When I'm riding through country like this, just me and Belle and the sky. Purpose, well, getting you to Martha's safe feels like purpose enough for now. Happiness." He shrugged. "That's a harder one. But I got moments. Coffee tastes good on a cold morning. Belle's healthy. Stars are pretty tonight. Sometimes moments are enough." Elizabeth looked up at the stars. Countless diamonds scattered across black velvet. "They're the same stars I saw from my window. The locked one. I used to pretend I could fly up to them, escape through the cracks between." "What stopped you from really trying? I mean..." She was quiet for a moment. "Spite, mostly. He wanted to break me, kill my spirit, make me nothing but what he said I was. Every day I survived with myself intact was a victory." She touched the canvas bag. "And this, my mother's Bible and her journal. The only things I had left of her. I couldn't leave them behind. Can I ask you something?" She tensed. "What?" "When you dream, is it always the same, the locked room?" "Usually. Sometimes it's the merchant from Denver. Sometimes it's the minister telling me to be a good girl, to stop making up stories." She shuddered. "Sometimes it's my stepfather's voice, reading scripture while he..." She couldn't finish. "Scripture." Thomas spat the word like it tasted bad. Men like that love twisting God's words to justify their evil. "Wives, submit to your husbands. Honor thy father. The woman shall be saved through childbearing." Elizabeth recited the verses in a monotone. He had one for every occasion. "You know that's not what those mean. Not the way he used them." "Do I? Sometimes I can't remember what God sounds like without his voice mixed in." Thomas moved back to his bedroll, this time stretching out but keeping his eyes on the stars. "My mother used to say God sounded like water in the desert quiet, easy to miss if you weren't listening careful, but clear and pure when you found it, never loud, never harsh, just there, waiting for you to be still enough to hear." Elizabeth laid back down too. though he noticed she positioned herself so she could see him, the fire, and the darkness beyond, always ready to run. Your mother sounds wise. She would have liked you. I think she had a soft spot for fighters. I don't feel like a fighter. I feel like a coward who ran away. Running from that's not cowardice. That's survival. And survival's its own kind of courage. They lay there in silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, lonely sound carrying across the desert. Bells shifted, tail swishing at some night insect. Mr. Briggs. Elizabeth's voice came small in the darkness. Yeah, if I fall asleep and dream again. Will you wake me? I don't want to go back to that room. Not tonight. I'll wake you, he promised. Sleep if you can. I'll keep watch. And he did. Through the long hours until dawn, Thomas Briggs sat against his saddle, sometimes tending the fire, sometimes cleaning weapons that didn't need cleaning, but always watching. When Elizabeth whimpered in her sleep, he'd speak quiet about the weather, about horses, about nothing important until she settled. It wasn't much, wouldn't fix what was broken, wouldn't erase what was done, but for tonight, it was enough. One person standing guard while another grabbed what rest they could, building trust one quiet hour at a time. When the sun finally painted the eastern mountains pink and gold, Elizabeth woke on her own, peaceful for once. She looked at Thomas, still at his post, and something shifted in her expression. Thank you, she said simply. Just keeping the fire going, he replied, but they both knew it was more than that. They broke camp as the day warmed, and when Thomas helped her mount Belle, careful not to touch, just steadying the stirrup, she didn't flinch quite as hard. Progress, he thought, slow as molasses, but progress all the same. They had a long way to go, in more ways than one. But the sun was shining, the road was open, and for the first time since he'd found her by Widow's Rock, Thomas thought maybe, just maybe, they'd both find what they were looking for at the end of it. Martha Clearwater's trading post sat at the crossroads like a stubborn fact, weathered but solid, refusing to bow to wind or time. They'd been traveling for 3 days now, Elizabeth growing steadier on Belle, though she still kept that careful distance between herself and Thomas when they rode together. That's it, Thomas said, pointing to the cluster of buildings ahead. Martha's place, been here since before the railroad, and she'll be here long after we're all dust. Elizabeth straightened in the saddle, hands tightening on the reins. What did you tell her about me? Nothing. Sent no word ahead. Far as Martha knows, I'm just another drifter passing through. With a woman who looks like she's been dragged through hell backward. You look like someone who survived something hard. That's different. Thomas studied her profile in the late afternoon light. The swelling around her eye had gone down, and Martha's promised medical supplies had helped her feet heal enough to wear the moccasins he'd bought from a traveling trader. Besides, Martha's seen worse. Trust me on that. The trading post was busy for a Thursday, 2 wagons out front, horses tied to the rail, the sound of voices drifting from inside. Elizabeth tensed like a deer scenting wolves. We don't have to go in, Thomas offered. Could make camp outside town. I'll bring supplies out. No. Her chin lifted. That stubborn streak he'd come to recognize flashing in her eyes. I'm not hiding forever. Just stay close. Close as you want me. They dismounted by the water trough, Belle drinking deep while Thomas watched Elizabeth gather herself. She smoothed her hair, straightened what was left of her dress Martha had sent fabric with that trader, and Elizabeth had sewn a new skirt to replace the worst of the tatters. But she still looked like what she was, someone who'd been running hard. The door opened and Martha Clearwater herself emerged, a woman somewhere past 50, built sturdy as her trading post, gray hair pulled back, severe but kind eyes that missed nothing. She took in Thomas, then Elizabeth, and her expression didn't change one whit. Thomas Briggs. Been a spell. Her voice carried the hint of Irish beneath years of frontier living. See you brought company. Martha, this is Elizabeth. She's looking for work, if you've got any. Martha's eyes traveled over Elizabeth, cataloging everything from her healing bruises to the way she stood ready to bolt to the canvas bag clutched in her hands. Can you read right figure sums? Yes, ma'am. My father was a minister. He made sure I got proper schooling. Minister's daughter. Martha's tone gave away nothing. Well, come in then. We'll talk terms over coffee. You look like you could use a meal too. The inside of the trading post was organized chaos shelves stocked with everything from ammunition to calico. Barrels of flour and sugar. Tools hanging from the rafters. 3 men lounged by the cold stove, passing a bottle between them. Their eyes landed on Elizabeth like flies on honey. Well now, one of them drawled, standing up unsteady. What have we here? Elizabeth froze. Thomas stepped forward, casual but deliberate, putting himself between her and the drunk. Afternoon, boys. Hot one today. Not talking to you, mister. The drunk tried to peer around Thomas. Talking to the pretty little. No, you're not. Martha's voice cut through like a blade. Jake Pembridge, you're drunk in my store again. You know the rules. Out. Aw, Martha, I was just being friendly like. Out, all 3 of you. And don't come back until you're sober and ready to apologize to the lady. The men grumbled but shuffled toward the door. The one called Jake made to shoulder past Elizabeth. But Thomas's hand shot out, caught his arm in a grip that made the drunk yelp. Watch yourself, Thomas said quiet. Man should be careful where he steps. Jake yanked free, glared, but something in Thomas's eyes made him think better of whatever he'd planned to say. The 3 of them left, bottle and all. Martha shook her head. Railroad workers, more money than sense and less manners than my mule. Come on back, both of you. Living quarters are through here. She led them through a curtained doorway into a surprisingly cozy space, a kitchen with a real stove, table and chairs, even gingham curtains on the windows. Elizabeth's eyes went wide at the normalcy of it all. Sit, Martha commanded, already putting the coffee pot on. Thomas, you look like 10 miles of bad road. When's the last time you ate proper? Been making do. That's what I thought. Elizabeth, you like cornbread? Got a batch fresh this morning. Yes, ma'am, thank you. They sat at the table, Elizabeth choosing the chair that put her back to the wall. View of both doors. Martha served coffee strong enough to float horseshoes and cornbread with butter and honey, then settled across from them with her own cup. Now then, I do need help. My last girl ran off with a tinker 2 weeks back. Left me trying to manage inventory and customers both. Can't hardly keep up. Work's not easy, lots of lifting. Dealing with rough men like those fools. Long hours. But it's honest work. And I pay fair. $1 a day plus room and board. Elizabeth's eyes widened. That's generous. That's fair for someone who can actually keep books proper. Last girl couldn't subtract to save her life. Martha sipped her coffee. Questions? Where would I sleep? Got a room upstairs, lock on the door, good sturdy one. Windows face the back, so it's quiet. You take your meals with me unless you prefer otherwise. And Mr. Briggs. Martha's eyebrows rose slightly. Thomas goes where Thomas goes. Always has. Though he's welcome to the barn loft if he's staying around. Thomas shifted in his chair. Haven't decided yet. No, Martha's tone was mild, but her eyes were sharp. Well, decisions have a way of making themselves sometimes. Elizabeth, what do you say? Want to give it a try? Elizabeth looked at Thomas, something vulnerable in her expression. He gave her the slightest nod encouragement, not instruction. She turned back to Martha. Yes, I'd like to try. Good. Finish your coffee, then I'll show you around. Thomas, you need supplies. The usual, ammunition, coffee, dried beans, new shirt if you've got one. Course I do. Martha stood. All business now. Elizabeth, you come along. Might as well start learning where everything is. Elizabeth rose to follow, then hesitated. My bag. Bring it. Your room's got a chest with a lock, too. Know how it is sometimes, needing to keep things safe. The two women disappeared into the store proper, leaving Thomas alone with his coffee and thoughts. He could hear Martha's voice, patient and steady, explaining the inventory system. Elizabeth's responses came quiet but clear. She was trying, pushing past her fear to grab this chance at a new life. Thomas finished his coffee, went to tend Belle. The barn was well maintained, with fresh hay and good water. He unsaddled her, rubbed her down proper, all the while aware of a strange reluctance to finish the task. Once Belle was settled, what excuse did he have to stay? He was checking Belle's hooves when footsteps made him look up. Elizabeth stood in the barn doorway, silhouetted by late afternoon sun. Martha gave me this, she said, holding up a calico dress, blue with tiny white flowers. Said I couldn't work the store looking like I'd been wrestling bears. It's pretty. Suit you better than what you got now. She stepped into the barn, still maintaining that careful distance. Are you leaving? Haven't decided. Oh. She looked down at the dress, fingers plucking at the fabric. I understand. You've done more than enough already. I just hoped, maybe. What? Nothing. It's foolish. She turned to go. Elizabeth. She stopped but didn't turn back. What did you hope? That you'd stay just for a while, until I know I can do this. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. I'm still scared. All the time. Those men today when they looked at me. I was back in that room. Martha seems kind. But what if she's not? What if this is just another trap? What if... Hey. Thomas's voice was gentle. Turn around. She did, slowly. Tears tracked down her cheeks, though she wasn't sobbing, just leaking pain like a cracked cup leaks water. I'll stay, he said. Long as you need me to, take that job in the barn loft, help Martha with heavy lifting, ride shotgun on supply runs. Been a while since I stayed put anywhere, but might be good for me too. Really, but Elizabeth, I can't stay forever. Got my own ghosts to run from, or maybe run toward. Haven't figured out which yet. But for now, while you're finding your feet, I'll be here. She smiled then. First real smile he'd seen from her. It transformed her face, showed the girl she must have been before the world tried to break her. Thank you. Thomas, I know I keep saying that, but... No need. We're friends. Aren't we? Friends help each other. Friends. She tested the word like it was foreign. I haven't had a friend in so long I'd forgotten what it felt like. Well, you got one now. Maybe too. Martha doesn't offer her spare room to just anybody. She sees something in you. What do you see? Thomas considered the question, looking at this young woman who'd survived what would have destroyed many. I see someone stronger than she knows. Someone who's been bent near to breaking but didn't break. Someone who's going to surprise herself with what she can do, given half a chance. Elizabeth ducked her head, but he caught the pleased flush on her cheeks. I should go try on this dress. Martha wants me to start in the morning. Help with the breakfast rush. A breakfast rush. Apparently, she serves meals to travelers. Biscuits and gravy, flapjacks, coffee. Says it brings in extra money and keeps folks honest. Hard to rob someone who's fed you. That's Martha. Sharp as a tack and twice as tough. Elizabeth headed for the door, then paused. Thomas, that thing you said about trust, how it's built 1 hour at a time, I think I'm starting to understand what you meant. She left before he could respond, but her words lingered in the dusty barn air. Thomas went back to tending Belle, whistling soft and feeling something he hadn't felt in years, like maybe he was exactly where he was supposed to be, doing exactly what he was supposed to do. That evening, Martha served supper in her kitchen: venison stew and fresh bread, pickled beets from her garden. Elizabeth wore the new dress, hair washed and pinned up proper. She looked younger, clean and fed, but also somehow older, like surviving had aged her soul, if not her body. "You'll do fine," Martha told her as they cleaned dishes together. "Those men today were nothing. Wait till you meet my regular customers, rougher than a cob and twice as ornery. But good hearts, most of them. They'll respect you if you respect yourself." "How do you know they will?" Martha dried a plate with practiced efficiency. "Because I'll shoot anyone who doesn't. Got a scattergun under the counter and I'm a fair hand with it, but it won't come to that. You carry yourself like you matter. People tend to believe it." Later, Thomas sat on the porch while the women talked inside. He could hear their voices through the window, Martha sharing gossip about local families, Elizabeth asking questions about the business. Normal conversation, the kind that built connection stitch by stitch. The moon rose full over the desert, painting everything silver and shadow. Somewhere out there, Elizabeth's stepfather was probably still looking for her. Maybe that merchant from Denver, too. Men like that didn't give up easy when they thought something belonged to them. But she was safe here, for now. Martha would watch out for her, and Thomas would watch out for them both until Elizabeth found her strength again. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it was enough for tonight. Through the window, he heard Elizabeth laugh, just a small sound, quickly stifled like she'd surprised herself. But it was there. First her smile. Now her laugh. Slowly, carefully, she was coming back to life. Thomas pulled out his knife, found a piece of soft pine, started whittling. He'd stay as long as she needed him, help her build a wall of normal days between herself and the nightmare she'd escaped. And maybe, in the process, he'd find some peace for his own restless spirit. The night was warm, the stars bright, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, Thomas Briggs felt something that might have been hope. 2 weeks had passed at Martha's trading post, and Elizabeth was beginning to find her rhythm. She woke before dawn to help with breakfast, spent her days managing inventory and serving customers, and retired to her locked room each night with her mother's Bible and journal. Thomas watched her grow steadier, like a plant finally given water and sun after a long drought. But he noticed things others might miss, the way her hands still trembled when she counted money, how she kept her sleeves pulled down even in the heat, the careful distance she maintained from every man who entered the store. She was healing, yes, but some wounds ran deeper than others. It was a Tuesday afternoon when Thomas saw them for the first time. Elizabeth had been reaching for a bolt of fabric on a high shelf, and her sleeve caught on a nail, tearing. As she yanked free, the fabric pulled back to reveal her forearm. The scars were precise, deliberate, a row of thin white lines marching up her arm like tally marks, some old and faded, others pink and recent. She saw him looking and quickly pulled the torn sleeve down, face flushing with shame. "Elizabeth." "Don't." She turned away, clutching the fabric bolt like a shield. "Please don't." Thomas stood frozen, unsure what to say. He'd seen plenty of scars in his time battle wounds, accidents, the marks life left on a body. But these were different. These were inflicted by the person who bore them. And that changed everything. "I need to fix this sleeve," she said, voice carefully neutral. "Martha will wonder what happened." She fled to the back room before he could respond, leaving Thomas standing among the barrels and shelves, feeling like he'd glimpsed something too private, too painful to acknowledge in daylight. That evening, he found her sitting behind the store, watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold. She'd changed dresses, the torn one probably already mended with her precise stitches. Thomas settled onto a crate nearby, not too close, and pulled out his whittling. They sat in silence for a long while. The only sounds the whisper of his knife on wood and the distant call of a hawk. Finally, Elizabeth spoke. "You must think I'm mad." "No. Weak, then damaged." Thomas studied the piece of pine in his hands, considering his words. "I think you were in pain. People in pain do what they have to do to survive it." It helped. she said, so quiet he almost missed it. When everything else hurt too much, when I couldn't escape, when I thought I'd go mad from being trapped, it helped, made me feel like I had some control over something, even if it was just that. When did you start? The third time he came to my room, after I realized nobody was going to help me, that I was truly alone. She pulled her knees to her chest. I know it's wicked. Self-harm is a sin. The body is a temple and all that. But my temple was already defiled. So what did it matter? You're not wicked. Thomas's voice came out fiercer than intended. You're not defiled. You're a survivor who did what she had to do to keep going. The marks say otherwise. The marks say you fought, maybe not the way others would understand, but you fought to keep some piece of yourself separate from what was happening. That's not weakness. Elizabeth, that's its own kind of strength. She turned to look at him then, eyes bright with unshed tears. You're not disgusted. By you, never. By the man who drove you to that every damn day. I haven't, not since I ran, been tempted, especially after nightmares. But I haven't. Good, that's good. Thomas set down his whittling, chose his next words careful. My sister, Sarah, I told you about her, after our parents died, before she married. I'd catch her sometimes with her hands all scratched up. Said she'd been picking berries, or the cat got her. Always some excuse. Found out later she'd been digging her nails into her palms when the grief got too heavy. Said the sharp pain helped her breathe past the weight on her chest. What did you do? Got her a piece of leather to squeeze instead. Told her whenever she felt the need to hurt, squeeze that leather hard as she could. Wasn't perfect, but it helped some. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small object. Been carrying this since I found you. Didn't know if... Wasn't sure how to bring it up. It was a smooth river stone, small enough to fit in a palm, with a natural indentation that made it perfect for worrying with a thumb. Picked it up at Willow Springs. Thought maybe, when you feel the need, you could hold this instead. Press hard as you want. Won't judge, won't scar, won't get infected. Elizabeth took the stone with trembling fingers, turned it over in her hands. It's warm. Been in my pocket. It's yours now, if you want it. She closed her fist around the stone, held it against her chest. Thank you for understanding. For not... Most people would say I'm ruined. Most people are fools. Thomas picked up his whittling again. You're not ruined. Elizabeth, you're just learning how to heal. That's a different thing entirely. Is that what you're doing, learning how to heal? He considered this. Maybe been running from my ghosts so long. I'd forgotten you could do anything else with them, but watching you these past weeks, seeing you get stronger every day, makes a man think. About what? About whether it's time to stop running, find somewhere to plant my feet for a while. Elizabeth smiled, soft and tentative. Martha said you never stay anywhere long. Said you're like tumbleweed wind blows, and off you go. Martha talks too much. She cares about you. Says you saved her nephew from a range war a few years back. Wouldn't take any reward. Wasn't looking for reward. No, you never are. Elizabeth shifted on her seat, still holding the stone. Can I ask you something? Shoot! Why didn't you ever marry, have a family of your own? Thomas was quiet for a long moment, watching the last light fade from the mountains. Came close once. Girl named Mary Catherine, back in Missouri before the war. Pretty as a spring morning. Smart too. Her father owned the general store. Approved of the match. We were going to marry soon as I got back from fighting. What happened? I didn't come back the same man who left. War does that, changes you in ways you don't expect. Mary Catherine took one look at me and knew. Said my eyes were different, older, sadder. She tried. God bless her. But I could see her flinch when I'd wake up swinging from nightmares. Could see her watching me careful, like I might turn dangerous. He carved a long curl from the pine. She married the banker's son eventually, Has 4 kids now. Nice house on Main Street. Better life than I could have given her. Do you regret it? Regret her finding happiness? No. Regret becoming someone she couldn't love every day. They sat with that truth between them. Heavy but not uncomfortable. The first stars were coming out, and somewhere in the desert, coyotes began their evening chorus. Thomas. Yeah. Do you think someone could love me after everything? He set down his knife, gave her question the weight it deserved. Elizabeth, you're 18 years old. You've survived something terrible. Yes, but that's not all you are. You're smart, kind, stronger than you know. You make Martha laugh, which is no easy feat. You've got your whole life ahead of you. Of course someone could love you. Question is whether you'll let them when they try. I don't know if I could stand to be touched. Even the thought makes me... Then they'll love you without touching, or they'll wait until you're ready, or they'll find other ways to show it. Love's not just one thing. Elizabeth, it's patient and adaptable and willing to work around the broken places. She was crying now, silent tears sliding down her cheeks. You make it sound possible. Because it is. Maybe not today, maybe not for a while, but someday, when you're ready, when you've had time to remember who you are without someone else's hands trying to shape you. Elizabeth wiped her face with her sleeve, took a shaky breath. I should go in. Martha wants to teach me her biscuit recipe tonight. Important skill, making good biscuits. She stood, still clutching the river stone. At the door, she paused. Thomas, I'm glad you decided to stay. Me too, he said, and meant it. After she went inside, Thomas sat in the gathering darkness, thinking about scars and healing and the strange paths that brought broken people together. He thought about Mary Catherine and her banker husband, about Sarah and her leather strap, about all the ways people found to survive their pain. Through the lit window, he could see Elizabeth and Martha in the kitchen, Flour already dusting their aprons. Elizabeth was laughing at something Martha said, her face animated and young. The stone was on the table beside her, within easy reach. She'd probably always carry those scars, both the visible ones on her arms and the invisible ones on her spirit. But scars were just proof of survival, marks of battles fought and won. They didn't define a person any more than Thomas's own wounds defined him. A month ago, he'd found a broken girl by a rock in the desert. Tonight, he watched a young woman learning to make biscuits and laugh again. It wasn't a miracle, it was harder and slower and more precious than that. It was healing, one day at a time, one small victory at a time. Thomas picked up his whittling again, working by feel in the darkness. He was carving a horse, he realized, small and patient and steady. Like Belle, like the journey they'd all taken to get here, like the journey still ahead. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Elizabeth's stepfather was still out there. The nightmares would come again. Some days would be harder than others. But tonight, she was safe and laughing and learning something new. Tonight, that was enough. And if sometimes she pressed a river stone instead of opening her skin, if sometimes she chose a different kind of pain to manage the deeper hurt, well, that was healing too. That was choosing to fight a different way. And Thomas would honor that fight with all the respect it deserved. The stars wheeled overhead, infinite and patient, and Thomas Briggs whittled in the darkness, standing guard over hope. The morning started like any other at Martha's trading post, Elizabeth serving breakfast to a crew of railroad workers, Thomas loading supply wagons, Martha haggling with a trader over the price of coffee beans. But the normalcy shattered when a lone rider appeared on the horizon, moving fast and purposeful down the dusty road. Thomas noticed him first, something in the rider's bearing setting off old instincts. He set down the crate he was loading, hand moving casual toward his hip where his Colt rested. The rider drew closer, and Thomas recognized the type-hired gun. Professional tracker. The kind of man who hunted people for money and slept sound after. "Martha," he called, keeping his voice level. "Might want to get Elizabeth in the back room." But it was too late. The rider had already dismounted, was already pushing through the door with the confidence of a man who expected compliance. Elizabeth looked up from pouring coffee, and the pot slipped from her hands, shattering on the floor. The man smiled, thin and satisfied. "Well now, been a long ride looking for you, Miss Morrow." "You know this man?" Martha asked Elizabeth. But the girl couldn't answer, frozen like a rabbit before a snake. "Name's Josiah Greaves," the man said, pulling a folded paper from his coat. "Got a warrant here for one Elizabeth Sarah Morrow, wanted for horse theft. I'm authorized to bring her back to face justice." Thomas stepped through the door, positioned himself between Greaves and Elizabeth. "Let's see that warrant." Greaves's eyes narrowed, taking in Thomas's stance, the way his hand rested near his gun. "And you are someone who likes to see paperwork before anybody goes anywhere." The bounty hunter handed over the warrant, watching Thomas careful. It looked official enough, seal and signature from a judge in Cedar Creek. Elizabeth's stepfather listed as the complainant. The reward was $50, a fortune for most folks. "Seems in order," Greaves said. "Now step aside. The girl comes with me." "No," Elizabeth's voice cracked but held. "I'm not going back." "Not your choice. Miss, law's the law." "The law," Thomas said, handing back the warrant. "Says you can bring her in. Doesn't say I have to make it easy for you." Greaves's hand twitched toward his gun. "You threatening an officer of the court?" "I'm suggesting you have breakfast and think things through. Martha makes fine flapjacks. Might put you in a more reasonable mood." "I'm plenty reasonable. The girl stole a horse. That's a hanging offense." "She took one horse," Thomas said, "from a man who took everything else from her. Seems like a fair trade to me." "What's fair ain't my concern. Law's my concern." Greaves's eyes were cold, professional. "Now I'll ask once more, step aside." "Thomas," Martha's voice carried warning, "let's not have trouble in my store." But Elizabeth had found her voice and her courage. She stepped out from behind the counter, chin raised despite her trembling hands. "Mr. Greaves, what did my stepfather tell you? Did he mention why I ran?" "Said you're troubled, female hysteria. Said you make up stories, tell lies about good Christian folk." "Did he tell you about the merchant from Denver, the one he sold me to?" Greaves shifted, uncomfortable. "That's not—" "Did he tell you about the locked room, the Bible readings while he—" She stopped, swallowed hard. "Did he tell you anything true, or just the parts that made him look righteous?" "Miss, I don't care about family squabbles. You took a horse that wasn't yours. That's all that matters to the law." "Then the law's wrong," Thomas said quietly. "Maybe so, but it's still the law." Greaves's hand moved to his gun. "Last chance. Mister, move aside or I'll move you." The trading post went still, morning sunlight streaming through dusty windows, coffee cooling in cups. Everyone frozen in that moment before violence. Thomas had been here before, knew how fast it could go wrong, but he also knew some stands were worth making. "Elizabeth," he said, not taking his eyes off Greaves. "Go on back to the storeroom. Martha, you might want to join her." "Like hell," Martha said, and Thomas heard her moving behind the counter where she kept her scattergun. Greaves heard it too. His eyes flicked toward her, calculating odds. "This how it is, you folks interfering with lawful warrant." "We're suggesting," Thomas said mild, "that you got bad information, that maybe you should wire back to Cedar Creek. Ask some questions. Talk to other folks besides the man paying your fee." "That's not how this works." "It is today." They stood frozen, two men measuring each other across a space that might soon fill with gun smoke. Thomas had been faster once, before age and wear slowed him down. Was he still fast enough? Only one way to find out. Then Elizabeth did something that surprised them all. She walked forward, right past Thomas, and stood directly in front of Greaves. The bounty hunter's hand tightened on his gun. but he didn't draw on an unarmed woman. "My name is Elizabeth Sarah Morrow," she said, voice steady now. "My father was Reverend James Morrow of Cedar Creek. He was a good man who died too young. My mother was Sarah Morrow, and she died when I was 8, after father remarried. My stepfather began visiting my room at night. For 2 years, I endured things no girl should endure." "Miss, I don't—" "Listen." The word cracked like a whip. "You'll hunt me down, drag me back, collect your blood money. The least you can do is listen." Greaves looked uncomfortable, but he didn't interrupt. "When I refused to be sold to that merchant, my stepfather beat me, said it was for my own good, to break my willful spirit. When beating didn't work, he locked me in a room with no windows and left me there for 3 days. No food, little water, just his voice through the door, reading scripture about obedient women." Martha made a sound of disgust. Thomas watched Greaves's face, saw doubt creeping in. "I escaped through a loose board in the floor," Elizabeth continued. "Took his horse because mine had been sold to pay his debts. Rode until the horse gave out, then walked. If Mr. Briggs hadn't found me, I'd have died in the desert, and that still would have been better than going back." She rolled up her sleeves then, showed the scars Thomas had seen, the careful lines of old pain. "This is what your good Christian client drove me to. This is the justice you're serving." Greaves stared at the scars, then at her face. Something shifted in his expression. "Those could be from anything. You could be lying." "I could be." She rolled her sleeves back down. "But I'm not, and somewhere inside, you know it. The question is whether you care." The bounty hunter was quiet for a long moment. Then, $50 is a lot of money. "Blood money," Martha said from behind the counter. "Judas got 30 pieces of silver. Least you're getting a better rate." "I've got a reputation to maintain. Can't go back empty-handed." Thomas saw the opening. "What if you didn't? What if the girl you were tracking died in the desert tragic story? You searched for weeks, found evidence of her demise, horse bones, scraps of dress, clear signs of coyote activity. Very sad. Worth at least half fee for your efforts." Greaves looked at him sharp. "You suggesting I lie to a client?" "I'm suggesting the truth is complicated. Girl who stole that horse is gone, died out there in the wilderness. Elizabeth, who works at Martha's store, is someone else entirely. Different person. No connection to that old life. That's word games." "That's mercy," Martha said. "Something in short supply these days." Greaves looked around the room at Thomas, steady and ready, at Martha with her hand on her hidden gun, at Elizabeth, standing straight despite everything. His shoulders slumped slightly. "I find horse bones 2 days south," he said slowly. "Dress scraps caught on mesquite, tracks leading into canyon country where an injured girl couldn't survive. I searched for a week, but flash flood washed away any remains. Tragic story." He looked at Elizabeth. "You understand what I'm doing? Elizabeth Morrow is dead. Whoever you are now, that's who you stay." "I understand." Her voice was thick with unshed tears. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Just stay dead." He turned to go, then paused. "Word of advice. Miss, that stepfather of yours, he's not the giving up type. He'll send others. Might want to think about moving on, finding somewhere he'd never think to look." Then he was gone, spurs chiming as he walked to his horse. They watched through the window as he mounted up, touched his hat brim in mock salute, and rode back the way he came. Elizabeth sagged, and Thomas caught her elbow, guided her to a chair. "You did good. Took real courage, standing up to him like that." "I was terrified." "Courage ain't about not being scared. It's about doing what needs doing despite the fear." Martha brought water, pressed the glass into Elizabeth's hands. "That was close, too close. Man's right about one thing, your stepfather won't stop." "I know." Elizabeth drank, hands shaking now that danger had passed. "I'll have to leave. Won't I find somewhere else?" Not necessarily, Thomas said. Mind already working. Man like that, he's counting on you running scared, being alone, but you're not alone anymore. What are you saying? Thomas looked at Martha, saw understanding in her eyes. I'm saying maybe it's time to stop running. Time to build something he can't tear down. You've got friends now. Elizabeth, that changes the game. But the law? Law failed you once already. Sometimes justice and law aren't the same thing. He squeezed her shoulder. Gentle, and was pleased when she didn't flinch. Progress. Besides, Elizabeth Morrow is dead. Remember, died in the desert, tragic story. Whoever you decide to be next, that's your choice. She looked up at him, those green eyes still scared but holding something new hope. Maybe, or the beginning of belief that she might actually have a future worth fighting for. Who do I want to be? She mused. I don't even know where to start. Start with breakfast, Martha said, practical. That coffee's all over my floor, and we've got customers coming. Life goes on, and best revenge against men like your stepfather is living it well. Elizabeth managed a small smile. Yes, ma'am. I'll get the mop. As she moved away, Martha caught Thomas's arm. This isn't over. You know that. I know, but she faced down a bounty hunter today. Told her truth out loud. That's not nothing. No, Martha agreed, watching Elizabeth clean up the spilled coffee with steady hands. That's not nothing at all. Girl's got steel in her spine, just needed chance to show it. Thomas nodded, but his mind was already on what came next. Greaves would buy them time, but not much. They needed a plan, something more permanent than hoping the next hunter would be as susceptible to conscience. But for now, Elizabeth was safe. She was finding her voice, her courage, her ability to stand up straight and speak her truth. That was worth celebrating, worth protecting. And Thomas Briggs had gotten good at protecting things worth saving, even if it meant standing between them and all the warrant-wielding devils the world could send. The morning resumed its rhythm, customers coming and going, Elizabeth serving breakfast with steady hands. Martha conducting business like armed standoffs were common as sunrise. But something had shifted, some invisible line crossed. Elizabeth Morrow was dead. Whoever this young woman chose to become, she'd have help doing it. And that, Thomas thought as he went back to loading wagons, made all the difference in the world. The nightmare came at 3 a.m, violent and familiar. Elizabeth woke with her stepfather's voice still echoing in her ears, quoting Ephesians while his hands, no, she wouldn't think about his hands. She sat up in her narrow bed, nightgown soaked with sweat, the taste of fear bitter on her tongue. Her room at Martha's was safe-locked door, sturdy walls. Thomas sleeping in the barn just across the yard. But in the darkness, safety felt like an illusion. She could still feel the walls of that other room closing in, still hear the scratch of the key in the lock, still smell his tobacco-stained breath as he explained why she deserved this, how it was for her own good. I'm not there, she whispered to the darkness. I'm here. I'm safe. I'm not there anymore. But her body didn't believe her. Her heart raced like a spooked horse. Her hands shook, and that old familiar urge rose up to find something sharp, to make a different kind of pain, one she could control. She fumbled for the lamp, then remembered the river stone Thomas had given her. It was on the nightstand where she always kept it. She gripped it hard, pressing her thumb into the indentation until the pressure grounded her. Still, the walls felt too close, the air too thick. She needed out, needed space, needed the window. She could sit by the window, watch for dawn. That helped sometimes. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, padded barefoot to the window, and nearly cried out. There was already someone there, sitting on a crate in the yard below. Thomas, whittling by moonlight, keeping watch like he sometimes did when his own ghosts wouldn't let him sleep. Without thinking, she opened the window. The night air rushed in, cool and sage-scented, and Thomas looked up at the sound. Can't sleep? He asked, voice carrying soft in the stillness. Bad dream. He nodded, understanding without need for details. Want company? Or should I find somewhere else to sit? Elizabeth considered. 3 weeks ago, she would have retreated, locked the window, huddled alone with her terror. But 3 weeks ago, she hadn't stood up to a bounty hunter, hadn't told her truth out loud, hadn't started remembering who she was beyond her stepfather's victim. Stay, she said, please. They sat like that for a while. Her at the window, him in the yard, comfortable in shared sleeplessness. The moon was waning, casting everything in silver and shadow. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its pack. What do you whittle when you can't sleep? She asked eventually. Thomas held up his work, a small figure, still rough but recognizably human. Been working on this one for a while. Can't seem to get her face right. My sister, Sarah, been trying to carve her likeness from memory, but memory's a tricky thing. Changes every time you reach for it. Elizabeth pulled her shawl tighter. I dream about my mother sometimes, but her face is starting to blur. I look at her photograph and think, is that really how she looked, or am I just remembering the photograph now? Photographs are their own kind of lie. Frozen moment, not the whole truth. Thomas made another careful cut. Sarah never sat still long enough for photographs. Always moving, always laughing. That's what I can't capture the life in her. Tell me about her, the real her, not the photograph her. Thomas smiled, and even from her window, Elizabeth could see how it softened his weathered features. Sarah was bright, not just smart, though she was that too, but bright like a flame, drawing everyone close. She'd walk into a room and it felt warmer somehow. She sounds wonderful. She was stubborn too, though, Lord, that girl could argue the color of the sky if she had a mind to. Once convinced me black was white and up was down, just through sheer force of will. His hand stilled on the carving. I miss that most, her voice, arguing with me about something foolish. I miss my mother's singing, Elizabeth offered. She'd hum while she worked, these old hymns from her childhood. I find myself humming them sometimes, but I can never remember all the words. What was her favorite? Elizabeth thought. There was one, in the sweet by and by. She'd sing it while making bread, said it made the dough rise better, having sweet songs sung over it. To her surprise, Thomas began to hum, low and rough but recognizable, the melody of her mother's favorite hymn, carried on the night air like a gift. Elizabeth felt her throat tighten with unshed tears. She would have liked you, she said when he finished. Mama always said to judge a man by how he treated those who couldn't help him back. Smart woman. Seems it runs in the family. They fell quiet again, but it was a comfortable quiet. Elizabeth found her heartbeat slowing, the panic of her nightmare fading. The stone in her hand had warmed to her skin temperature, smooth and reassuring. Thomas. Yeah. The dream tonight. It was different. Usually, I dream about what happened, but tonight, I dreamed about what almost happened. With that merchant from Denver. She swallowed hard. In the dream, nobody came to help. Nobody stopped it. I woke up thinking maybe that's the real world, and this you, Martha, being safe, maybe this is the dream. Thomas stood, moved closer to the window, though still maintaining respectful distance. In the moonlight, she could see his face clearly, lined and weathered, but kind. Feel that stone in your hand, he asked. Feel how solid it is. Yes, that's real. The cold air on your face, that's real. My voice, talking to you right now, that's real. He gestured to the trading post, the barn, the desert beyond. This is the true world. Elizabeth, the other, the locked room and the merchant, that's the nightmare. It has no power here except what you give it. But the memories will fade, not disappear, maybe, but fade, like old scars. still there if you look, but not bleeding anymore, not defining everything. Elizabeth pressed the stone harder. How can you be sure? Because I've walked that path. Different nightmare, same journey. There were years I couldn't tell what was real, the war, the things I saw and did, or the peace after. Took time and stubbornness and a few good people to help me sort it out. Am I one of your good people who helps you sort? Thomas smiled again, that rare, genuine expression. You know what I believe you are. Been sleeping better since we got here. Fewer ghosts visiting. Maybe it's knowing someone else is fighting their own battles nearby. Makes mine seem more manageable. A thought struck Elizabeth, sudden and clear. That's why you stay. Isn't it not just to protect me, but because it helps you too, having someone to protect? Maybe. He went back to his crate, picked up his whittling. Man needs purpose. For a long time, my only purpose was not dying. Then it was finding folks who needed help and helping them. But lately, he paused, chose his words careful. Lately, I've been thinking about building instead of just wandering, staying instead of leaving. Novel thought for an old saddle tramp like me. Martha says you're not that old. 37's not ancient. Feels it sometimes, especially on cold morning. Elizabeth smiled despite herself. Poor old man. How do you manage stubborn determination and Martha's coffee? Though that might be the same thing. She actually laughed then. Soft but real. The sound surprised them both. When had laughter become possible again? When had the weight on her chest lifted enough to allow for humor? I should try to sleep, she said, though she was reluctant to leave this moment the safety of distance and darkness, the comfort of shared understanding. Want me to stay out here, keep watch a while longer? You don't have to. Elizabeth, his voice was gentle but firm. Do you want me to stay? She thought about it. About what she wanted versus what she thought she should say. Yes, if you don't mind. Just knowing you're there helps. Then I'll be here, long as you need. She started to close the window, then stopped. Thomas, that thing I said in my dream, about not being good, I don't really believe that. Not anymore. I used to, when it was happening, when he made me repeat it back to him. But now I think maybe he was the one who wasn't good. And maybe that's not my fault. Maybe it never was. Thomas looked up at her, and even in the moonlight, she could see pride in his expression. No, maybe about it. Never was your fault, never will be. Man like that, he's the one carries the sin. You were just trying to survive it. Elizabeth nodded, throat too tight for words. She closed the window quietly, made her way back to bed. The nightmare might return, probably would, but for now. She felt anchored, the stone in her hand, Thomas in the yard, Martha sleeping down the hall, the solid walls of this place that had become sanctuary. She lay down, pulled the quilt to her chin, and began to hum, In the Sweet By and By, her mother's favorite, the one Thomas had hummed for her. The melody was shaky at first, but grew stronger as she remembered. Not all the words. Not yet, but the tune was there, connecting her to something good and clean from before everything went wrong. Outside, Thomas whittled and kept watch. Inside, Elizabeth hummed herself toward sleep, and somewhere between them, in the space where broken people help each other heal, something precious took root and began to grow. The nightmare didn't return that night. When dawn came, painting the desert in shades of rose and gold, Elizabeth woke naturally, peacefully. She looked out her window to find Thomas gone, probably already starting his morning chores. But on the crate where he'd been sitting was the small wooden figure, a girl with arms outstretched, face turned up to the sky, captured in a moment of joy. She understood the message. This was how he remembered his sister, how he chose to remember her. Not broken, not beaten, but reaching for the sky. And maybe, Elizabeth thought as she dressed for the day, that was a choice she could make too, to remember herself not as her stepfather's victim, but as her mother's daughter. reaching for something better. The stone went in her pocket, warm and solid. The wooden figure went on her dresser, a reminder that even broken people could choose what to carve from their memories. And Elizabeth Sarah Morrow, or whoever she was becoming, went downstairs to make breakfast and face another day. She was still afraid, still carried scars, visible and hidden. But she was not alone, not worthless, not defined by what had been done to her. And that, she thought as she entered the warm kitchen where Martha was already making coffee, was its own kind of miracle. The dust cloud appeared on the horizon just after noon, too organized to be a storm, too deliberate to be coincidence. Thomas saw it first from his position on the roof where he'd been patching Martha's shingles. 3 riders, moving with purpose down the main road toward the trading post. He climbed down quick but calm, found Martha in the storeroom checking inventory. "Company coming. 3 men, riding hard." Martha's face went tight. "Trouble." "Maybe. Where's Elizabeth?" "Out back, hanging laundry." Martha was already moving toward her shotgun. "I'll get her inside." But Thomas was faster, slipping through the back door to find Elizabeth pinning sheets to the line, humming that hymn her mother loved. She looked up at his approach, smile fading when she saw his expression. "Inside," he said quietly. "Now." To her credit, she didn't argue or panic, just dropped the wet shirt she was holding and followed him. They'd barely made it through the door when the riders pulled up out front, horses lathered with sweat and dust. Thomas recognized the type before they even dismounted hired guns, but not the professional kind like Greaves. These were the cheap sort, mean and careless, the kind who enjoyed their work too much. The one in front was big, beard unkempt, with the deliberate swagger of a man used to using his size. The other 2 were lean and nervous, hands twitchy near their guns. "Stay in the back," Thomas told Elizabeth. "No matter what you hear." "Thomas, promise me." She nodded, face pale but determined. Martha appeared with her shotgun, expression grim. "Seen them before. They were through here last month, caused trouble at the saloon. Bart Hutchins and his cousins." The bell over the door jangled as the men entered. Hutchins first, filling the doorway, followed by his shadows. Their eyes swept the store, landed on Martha behind the counter. "Afternoon, ma'am," Hutchins said, voice oily with false courtesy. "Looking for someone. Girl about 18, dark hair, green eyes, runaway. Heard she might be working here." "Lots of folks work here," Martha said evenly. "I don't keep track of every drifter looking for a meal and a day's wages." Hutchins smiled, showing tobacco-stained teeth. "This one's particular. Stole a horse from her rightful guardian. Man's offering good money for her return." "How much?" Thomas asked from his position by the window. The men turned, sizing him up. $50, one of the cousins said. 20 for information leading to her capture." "That's a lot of money," Thomas agreed. "Man must want her back powerful bad." "Family matter," Hutchins said. "Girl's not right in the head, needs protecting from herself." "That's so." Thomas moved casual, positioning himself between the men and the doorway to the back room. "Funny thing about family matters, they tend to get complicated when you look close." "Nothing complicated about it. Girl took what wasn't hers. Law's clear on horse theft." "Already had a bounty hunter through here about that," Martha said. "Josiah Greaves. Said he tracked the girl into the desert, found evidence she didn't make it. Tragic story." Hutchins' eyes narrowed. "Greaves is getting old. Might have missed something." "Might have," Thomas agreed. "Or might be he found exactly what there was to find. Desert's unforgiving to folks on the run. Then you won't mind if we look around some, make sure this dead girl isn't serving coffee and biscuits." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Thomas saw Martha's hands tighten on the shotgun, saw the cousin spread out slightly, preparing for trouble. The moment balanced on a knife's edge. Then the back door opened, and Elizabeth walked in. Thomas's heart sank. He'd told her to stay hidden. But here she was, chin up, wearing her best dress, moving with careful dignity to stand beside Martha. "I heard you were looking for me," she said clearly. Hutchins grinned triumphant. "Well now, not so dead after all." "Elizabeth Morrow is dead," she said. "Died in the desert, scared and alone. I'm someone else now. Someone who's not afraid of men like you." "That right." Hutchins moved closer, and Thomas tensed. "Seem pretty alive to me. Got a name for who you are now." "Lily," she said without hesitation. "Lily Clearwater, Martha's niece from back east. Been here 2 months, helping with the store." Martha caught on quick. "That's right, my sister's girl. Came out after her mother passed. Been a godsend with the books." Hutchins wasn't buying it. "Funny, your niece looks just like the girl we're hunting." "Lots of girls look alike," Elizabeth Lilly said. "Dark hair's common enough, so are green eyes. But I've got something Elizabeth Morrow didn't have." "What's that?" "Friends." She looked at Thomas, at Martha. "People who won't let me disappear into some locked room again. People who know the truth about why Elizabeth ran." "Truth," Hutchins scoffed. "Only truth that matters is the law. And the law says—" "The law says a lot of things," Thomas interrupted. "Says a man can't beat his wife. Says a guardian has to protect his ward, not sell her. Says there's consequences for bearing false witness. Funny how some parts of the law get more attention than others. You calling Mr. Morrow a liar? I'm saying any man who'd pay your type to hunt down an 18-year-old girl probably has reasons that wouldn't stand up in honest court." Hutchins' face darkened. "Watch your tongue, mister. 3 of us, 1 of you. Don't like those odds." 2, Martha corrected, lifting her shotgun slightly. "And this scattergun evens things considerable." 3, Lily said quietly. "I'm not hiding anymore. Not from them, not from anyone." The cousins were getting nervous, hands hovering near their guns but not quite touching. They'd expected easy prey, a scared girl they could drag back for quick money. This was becoming something else. "Here's what's going to happen," Thomas said, voice steady as bedrock. "You boys are going to walk out of here, get on your horses and ride back to wherever you came from. You're going to tell Mr. Morrow that the trail's cold, the girl's gone, and that's the end of it. Or," Hutchins challenged, "or we have a problem. And problems, in my experience, tend to get messy, loud, draw attention. Sheriff Paulson in town. He's particular about keeping the peace. Might start asking questions about why 3 armed men are threatening peaceful shopkeepers. Might wonder what kind of man sends thugs after young women. Might even wire around. Check if there's wants or warrants on fellows who take money for hunting people like property." That hit home. One cousin shifted uncomfortably, and Thomas filed that away man had paper on him somewhere. "You're bluffing," Hutchins said, but uncertainty crept into his voice. "Maybe, but are you willing to bet your life on it all for $50 and a man who's too coward to come himself?" "He's no coward. He's a deacon, respectable man." "Respectable men don't send wolves after lambs," Lily said. "Respectable men don't lock girls in rooms. Respectable men don't—" She stopped, took a breath. "But you know that, don't you? Somewhere under all that greed and meanness. You know what kind of man you're working for." The store fell silent except for the tick of the wall clock. Thomas watched Hutchins wrestle with it, pride against practicality, easy money against complications. $50 ain't worth dying for," the nervous cousin muttered. "Shut up," Hutchins snapped. But the doubt was spreading. "Girl comes with us, no trouble. Everybody walks away happy." "Except her," Thomas said. "And that's the part you're not understanding. She's not alone anymore, not friendless, not helpless. You take her. You'll have to go through us. And maybe you do. Maybe you're faster, meaner, luckier. But at least one of you won't ride away. Maybe 2. That worth it to you." Hutchins looked at his cousins, saw their resolve wavering, looked at Martha, steady with her shotgun. at Thomas, hand resting easy near his colt, at Lily, standing straight and unafraid between them. "This ain't over," he said finally. "Mr. Morrow don't give up easy." "Then tell Mr. Morrow he's welcome to come himself." Lily said, "Tell him Elizabeth's dead, but Lily Clearwater would be happy to discuss with the sheriff why a guardian would send armed men after his ward. Tell him there are witnesses now to his character. Tell him some stones are better left unturned." Hutchins spat on the clean floor, a last gesture of defiance. "You made an enemy today, girl. All of you did." "We made a stand," Thomas corrected. "Different thing entirely." The three men left, boots heavy on the boards, bell jangling angry as the door slammed. Through the window, they watched them mount up, Hutchins gesturing angry at his cousins, then riding hard back the way they came. Martha lowered her shotgun, hands trembling slightly. "That was close." "Too close," Thomas agreed. He looked at Lily. "Why didn't you stay hidden?" "Because hiding is what Elizabeth would do, and I meant what I said. She's dead." She was shaking now that danger had passed, but her voice stayed firm. "I'm tired of being hunted, tired of being afraid. If they want Lily Clearwater, they'll find someone who fights back." "Brave words," Martha said. "But Thomas is right. That was dangerous." "Everything's dangerous for women like me, at least this way. I face it on my feet instead of my knees." Thomas studied her, really looked at this young woman who'd transformed from terrified runaway to someone who could face down 3 armed men. The change went deeper than the name. Something fundamental had shifted. "Lily Clearwater," he said, testing the name. "Going to take some getting used to." She smiled, small but real. "I like it. New name for a new life. And Martha's niece that was inspired. Makes it legal-like." Martha agreed. "I'll write my sister tonight. Tell her if anyone asks. She's got a daughter named Lily who came west for her health. Sarah owes me favors. She'll back the story." "But they'll be back," Thomas said, "or others like them. Your stepfather is going to learn that some people can't be bought or bullied." Lily finished. "I'm done running. Thomas, this is my home now. These are my people. If he wants a fight, he'll get one." Thomas felt something ease in his chest, a worry he hadn't fully acknowledged. He'd been afraid she'd run again, keep running until she disappeared entirely. But this woman standing before him, calling herself Lily, choosing to plant her feet and fight this, was someone who might actually make it. "All right then," he said. "Lily Clearwater it is, but we need to be ready. Men like Hutchins, they don't forget being faced down, and your stepfather won't stop at 3 hired guns." "Then we'll be ready," Lily said simply. "All of us, together." Martha nodded, already thinking practical. "I'll talk to Sheriff Paulson. Tell him we had trouble. He's a good man, won't stand for thugs threatening honest folk, and I'll spread word among the neighbors. People here look out for each other." They spent the rest of the afternoon in preparation, Thomas cleaning and checking weapons, Martha writing letters and making plans, Lily going about her regular work but with a new awareness, a readiness that hadn't been there before. As the sun set, painting the desert in shades of fire, Thomas found Lily sitting on the back steps, her mother's Bible in her lap but unopened. "You did good today," he said, settling beside her with careful distance between them. "I was terrified. I didn't show—" "Good. I'm tired of showing fear, tired of being small." She traced the Bible's worn cover. "My mother would be proud. I think she was quiet, but she was strong. Stood up to my father once when he was wrong about something. Only time I ever saw her defy him, but she did it." "What about a family in our church? Freed slaves trying to make a life. Some folks wanted them gone. Father was going to stay quiet, keep the peace. But Mama stood up in church meeting and said if we couldn't welcome all God's children, we weren't much of a church. Shamed them into acting right." "Brave woman." "Yes, I forgot that for a while. Let my stepfather make me forget. But I remember now." She looked at Thomas. That's what you gave me. You know, not just safety. Time to remember who I came from, who I could be. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one. No more hiding, Thomas thought. No more running. Lily Clearwater had chosen her ground, and he'd stand with her on it. The fight wasn't over, might never be truly over. But today, they'd won something precious. Not just safety, but dignity. Not just survival, but the right to live on their own terms. And that, Thomas thought as night settled over the trading post, was worth any risk that might come. The evening was warm, and after supper, Lily sat on the porch steps with her mending while Thomas worked on Belle's tack nearby. Martha had retired early with a headache, leaving them alone with the crickets and stars. It had been a week since the confrontation with Hutchins, and an uneasy peace had settled over the trading post. "Your hands are steadier," Thomas observed, watching her work the needle through fabric. Lily looked down at her hands. He was right. The tremor that had plagued her for months was nearly gone. "I hadn't noticed." "You're healing." He said it simple, like stating the weather. "Some days I think so. Others—" She set down the shirt she was mending. "Can I tell you something? Something I haven't told anyone?" Thomas stopped working on the bridle, gave her his full attention. "Course. I used to pray he'd kill me." The words came out in a rush. "My stepfather. When he'd come to my room, I'd pray for God to let him go too far. Let him end it, because then at least it would be over." She pulled her knees to her chest. "What kind of person prays for that?" "Someone in unbearable pain," Thomas said quietly. "Nothing shameful in wanting pain to end." "But I don't want that anymore. Haven't since—" She paused, thinking. "Since that morning you gave me water at Widow's Rock, even when I was terrified, even when I thought you might be just another man who'd hurt me. Some part of me wanted to live, to see what came next." "Glad to hear it." Lily picked up the river stone from her pocket, turned it over in her fingers. "I've been thinking about what you said, about building instead of running. I want to build something here, a real life, but I don't know how. Same as anything else, one day at a time, one choice at a time. Is that what you're doing, building?" Thomas considered the question. "Maybe. Been a drifter so long. I'd forgotten what staying still felt like. But this place, these people—" He gestured to encompass the trading post, the desert beyond. "Starting to feel like somewhere I could plant roots. Because of your promise to protect me? Started that way, but it's more now." He met her eyes. "You're not the only one healing, Lily." She felt heat rise in her cheeks, looked away. There had been something growing between them these past weeks. Unspoken, but present. A connection deeper than shared trauma or protective instinct. She wasn't ready to name it. Wasn't sure she ever would be. But it was there. "Thomas, She stopped, suddenly afraid. "What is it?" "I don't know how to be with people. Normal people. I mean, Martha's teaching me to cook and keep house, and I can serve customers and make conversation. But anything deeper—" She pressed the stone harder. "He took that from me, the ability to trust touch, to believe kindness doesn't come with a price. I don't know if I'll ever get that back." Thomas was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was gentle. "You know what I see when I look at you." "What?" "Someone who's already braver than she knows. You stood up to armed men. You chose a new name and a new life. You reach out to Martha, laugh at her stories, help her with genuine care. That's trust, Lily. Maybe not the kind you're thinking of, but it's a start." "But what if that's all I can give? What if I'm too broken for more?" "Then that's enough. You don't owe anyone more than you can give. Not me, not anyone." Lily felt tears prick her eyes. "You really mean that?" "Every word." He went back to his work, giving her space to compose herself. "Besides, I'm not exactly prize material myself. Man my age, with my history. dragging ghosts around like old luggage? We're a pair of cracked pots, you and me. Maybe cracked pots hold water better. Lily said, they know how precious it is, not to leak. Thomas smiled at that. Martha's been teaching you philosophy along with biscuit making. No, that's all me. She picked up her mending again. I've been reading my mother's journal. She had all these thoughts about life, about faith, about surviving hard things. I wish I'd known her better. Tell me about her. So Lily did, sharing memories as they worked in the comfortable evening. Her mother teaching her to read using the Bible and almanac. Her mother sneaking her extra food when father insisted on fasting for penance. Her mother's quiet rebellion against the harshest interpretations of Scripture. She sounds like someone who understood that love and law aren't always the same thing. Thomas said, yes, that's exactly it. Father was all law, all rules. Mother was softer. She found the grace between the lines. Lily touched the journal in her pocket. I'm trying to be more like her, to find grace instead of just survival. You're doing fine at both. They worked in companionable silence until full dark. Then Thomas stood and stretched. Better turn in. Supply wagon comes tomorrow, and Martha wants everything reorganized before it arrives. Lily stood too, gathering her mending. At the door, she paused. Thomas, that future you're building, am I part of it? He looked at her, standing in the lamplight from inside. This young woman who'd become so much more than the broken girl he'd found in the desert. If you want to be... I do. The words came out sure and strong. Whatever that looks like, however long it takes to figure out, I want to be part of it, and I want you to be part of mine. Then we'll figure it out together. No rush, no expectations, just together. Lily smiled, the expression transforming her face. I like the sound of that. She went inside, and Thomas headed to the barn. But halfway there, he stopped, turned back to look at the trading post. Through the window, he could see Lily helping Martha prepare for bed, the two women moving around each other with easy familiarity. Home, he thought. When had this become home? The night was full of stars, and Thomas Briggs stood beneath them feeling something he hadn't felt in years, hope for a future that included more than just surviving another day. It wouldn't be easy. Lily still had healing to do, and so did he. Her stepfather was still out there, still a threat. The world was still hard and often cruel. But for the first time in longer than he could remember, the good outweighed the bad. The possibility of building something lasting seemed real instead of foolish, and that was worth any risk, any challenge that might come. Inside the barn, Belle nickered softly in greeting. Thomas patted her neck, thinking about roots and choices and the strange paths that led broken people to each other. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. But tonight, he had a place to sleep, good people nearby, and the promise of a future being built one careful day at a time. We're staying, girl, he told Belle. Long as they'll have us, we're staying. Belle snorted, apparently unsurprised. Horses, Thomas reflected, often knew these things before their riders figured them out. He bedded down in the loft, listening to the familiar sounds of Night Lily moving in her room above the store, Martha's gentle snoring, the endless whisper of desert wind. For the first time in years, Thomas Briggs fell asleep without his hand on his gun. There were better things to hold on to now. Hope, purpose, the promise of tomorrow. And somewhere in the darkness, a young woman named Lily Clearwater held a river stone and a wooden carving, building her own dreams of what might be. The past couldn't be changed, but the future that was still being written. And for two cracked pots learning to hold water again, that was more than enough. It was everything. The next morning brought clear skies and new possibilities. Thomas woke to the sound of Lily singing in the kitchen her mother's hymn, voice growing stronger with each verse. He smiled, stretched, and prepared to face whatever the day might bring. They were building something here, brick by brick, choice by choice, It might not look like what others expected, a scarred young woman who couldn't bear touch, a weathered gunman with too many ghosts, a tough widow who'd made herself a sanctuary in the desert. But it was theirs, and it was real, and it was worth protecting. Thomas climbed down from the loft to start his morning chores, whistling an accompaniment to Lily's distant song. The sun painted the desert gold and pink and full of promise. A new day, a new chance, a new life being built by people who'd learned that broken didn't mean worthless, that scarred didn't mean hopeless, that together was stronger than alone. And in the kitchen of Martha's trading post, Lily Clearwater sang her mother's songs and made biscuits that would rise better for having sweet music sung over them, just like her mother always said they would. The nightmare came hard that night, worse than it had been in weeks. Lily woke gasping, her stepfather's voice still echoing in her ears, the phantom weight of hands on her shoulders. She sat up, clutching the river stone, but this time it wasn't enough. The walls felt too close, the darkness too heavy, the memories too real. She wrapped herself in a shawl and crept downstairs, careful not to wake Martha. Outside, the desert night was cool and vast, stars scattered like spilled salt across black velvet. She stood on the porch, breathing deep, trying to shake off the lingering terror. Can't sleep. She jumped, then relaxed when she saw Thomas sitting in the shadows, whittling as usual. Bad one tonight, she admitted, moving to sit on the steps near him, not too close, but closer than she would have managed a month ago. Want to talk about it?
No, yes, I don't know.
She pulled the shawl tighter.
It was different this time. In the dream, I fought back, hit him, screamed, but it didn't matter. He was still stronger. Still.
She shuddered. But you fought, Thomas said quietly.
Even in your dream, you fought. That's change. Lily, that's growth.
Is it because I woke up just as scared as ever? Fear's not the enemy. Fear's just your body trying to keep you safe. The enemy is letting fear make your choices for you. He set down his whittling. And you haven't been doing that, not for a while now. Lily considered this, turning the stone over in her hands. I keep thinking about what you said, about broken pots, holding water better. But what if I'm not just cracked? What if I'm shattered? What if there's not enough left to hold anything? Thomas was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood, went into the barn, and came back with something wrapped in oilcloth. He handed it to her. Inside was a ceramic cup, clearly broken and mended with what looked like a mixture of pine resin and clay. The repair lines were visible, creating a pattern across the surface like golden veins. Found this in an abandoned homestead years back, he said. Someone loved it enough to fix it instead of throwing it away. Been carrying it ever since. Reminds me that broken things can still be beautiful, still be useful, sometimes more so than before they broke. Lily traced the repair lines with one finger. It's beautiful. So are you. The words hung in the air between them. Lily's breath caught. Thomas, I know, he said quickly. I know you're not ready for... I'm not trying to... Just wanted you to know. You're not shattered. Lily, you're like this cup, broken and mended and stronger at the mended places. She looked up at him, this weathered man who'd shown her more genuine kindness than she'd known existed. What if I'm never ready? What if I can never be what a normal woman should be? Then you'll be what you are, and that's more than enough. The tears came then, silent but cleansing. Thomas didn't try to comfort her, didn't move closer, just sat steady beside her while she cried out months of pain and fear and slowly building hope. When the tears finally stopped, Lily felt empty but clean, like a house after spring cleaning. She dried her eyes with her shawl, still clutching the mended cup. I want to tell you something, she said, about that last night, before I ran. Thomas nodded, waiting. He brought that merchant to my room, said it was time I learned my place, said he'd hold me down if necessary, make sure I cooperated. Her voice was steady, distant, like she was reading from someone else's story. That's when I knew. If I stayed, I'd die. Maybe not my body, but everything that made me myself. So when they left to get whiskey to celebrate their deal, I went out the window. You saved yourself. Did I? Because sometimes I think I left part of myself in that room. The part that could trust, that could hope for normal things, that could let people close without flinching. Maybe, Thomas said. Or maybe that part's just healing slower than the rest. Doesn't mean it's gone forever. Lily set down the cup carefully, pulled her knees to her chest. Can I ask you something? Anything. Do you ever think about what might have been if the war hadn't happened? If your sister had lived? If you'd married that girl in Missouri? Thomas leaned back, looking at the stars. Used to drove myself half mad with what-ifs. But then I realized something all those other paths. They don't lead here, and here's not so bad. Even with all the pain it took to get here. Can't have one without the other. Pain's part of the path. Question is what you do with it when you arrive. They sat in comfortable silence, the desert night wrapping around them like a blanket. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, lonely sound carried on the wind. I've been thinking, Lily said eventually, about the future, about what I want to build here. Yeah, I want to help other women, girls like me who need a safe place to land. Martha's already does some of that, taking in strays like me, but I want to do more, create a real sanctuary. She looked at him. Is that foolish? No, that's the least foolish thing I've ever heard. Would you help, if you're staying, would you help me build something like that? Thomas felt something shift in his chest, a settling like puzzle pieces finally fitting together. Lily, I'd help you build anything you set your mind to. She smiled then, shy but real. Even if it takes years, even if it's hard. Especially then, best things usually are hard. Then that's what I want. A place where broken girls can come to mend, where they can learn they're not ruined, just hurt, where they can find their strength again. Her voice grew stronger with each word. I want to call it Sarah's Haven, after your sister, if that's all right. Thomas had to clear his throat before he could speak. She would have loved that. She would have loved you. I think I would have loved her too. The night was growing late, but neither moved to go inside. This felt important. This quiet planning of a future neither had dared imagine. There's something else, Lily said. Something I need to say. Thomas waited. I care for you more than I thought I could care for anyone. It scares me, how much I care, because I don't know what to do with it. Don't know how to be what you deserve. Lily, let me finish, please. She took a breath. I may never be able to be a proper wife, may never be able to give you what other women could, but I want you to know that whatever I can give, however long it takes me to figure out what that is, it's yours. If you want it, if you can be patient. Thomas reached out slowly, deliberately, and placed his hand on the step between them, not touching her, but close enough that she could reach for it if she chose. Lily Clearwater, he said softly. I've been wandering for 20 years, looking for home. Never thought I'd find it in a broken girl by a desert rock, but here we are, and there's nowhere else I'd rather be, however long it takes. Whatever it looks like. I'm not going anywhere. Lily looked at his hand, then at her own, slowly, like approaching a skittish horse. She moved her hand until her little finger just barely touched his. The contact sent sparks through her, not fear, but something else, something that might, someday, grow into more. This is enough for now, she asked. This is everything. They sat like that, connected by the smallest touch, planning a future that would have seemed impossible just months ago. The mended cup sat between them, proof that broken things could be made beautiful again. The stars wheeled overhead, and the desert breathed around them, and two damaged souls continued the slow work of healing. "We should go in," Lily said eventually. "Morning comes early." "In a minute." Thomas squeezed her finger gently, then let go. "Want to remember this? All of it." "Me too." When they finally went inside Lily to her room, Thomas to the barn, both carried with them the warmth of possibility. Sarah's haven, a place for healing, a future being built one careful touch at a time. In her room, Lily placed the mended cup on her dresser next to the wooden carving, proof of survival, proof of hope, proof that broken didn't mean worthless. She climbed into bed, pulling her mother's quilt up to her chin. For the first time in memory, she didn't check the lock twice, didn't wedge the chair under the doorknob. Thomas was in the barn, Martha down the hall. She was safe, she was home, she was becoming who she was meant to be.
"Thank you,"
she whispered to the darkness, to God, to her mother's memory, to whatever force had led her to that rock where Thomas found her.
"Thank you for not letting me give up."
Outside, Thomas lay in the barn loft, planning. Sarah's haven would need buildings, supplies, protection. It would need supporters in town, legal standing. A dozen things he hadn't thought of yet, but they'd figure it out, together. He thought of his sister, of how proud she'd be to have her name on something that helped others heal. Thought of Lily's finger touching his, that spark of connection that promised more when she was ready. Thought of roots finally deep enough to hold against any storm. For the first time in 20 years, Thomas Briggs fell asleep thinking not of the past, but of the future. And in her room above the store, Lily Clearwater did the same. 2 broken pots, mended with gold, holding water and hope in equal measure. Tomorrow, they'd start building something new. Tonight, they'd earn their rest. The desert stars stood witness to promises made and healing begun. And somewhere in the vast Wyoming night, Sarah Briggs' spirit smiled to see her name given to such a worthy cause. The story wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But the hardest part, the breaking and the mending that was done, now came the living. And they'd do that together, one day at a time, one touch at a time, one dream at a time. In the sweet by and by, as Lily's mother used to sing, in the sweet by and by, there'd be healing and hope and home. And it started here. Tonight, with a whispered promise and a single touch and the courage to believe that broken people could build beautiful things. Thank you for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and share our thoughts about this journey through the Wild West. If you enjoyed this tale of healing and hope, please subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850, like this video, and hit the hype button to help more people discover these stories of the American frontier. Your support helps bring these historical tales to life for listeners around the world.